Thank you, everyone. Thanks for the introduction. I'd just like to acknowledge that we are on the land of the Aranda people and pay my respects to elders past and present. Also to everyone else in the room, First Nations people from around the Territory and wherever you come from, pay my respects to you as well and your ancestors. I suppose I see my presentation more about a case study really, and on the ground, linking in with the treaty, but also the project we've been going along with quietly at Yuendumu for the last 5 years, called the Walpri Project. I liken it to being a nation-building project. And within that, the project picks up on a number of things that both Tony and Donna have talked about. I suppose for me it's important to get stories from down here in Central Australia. We know the challenges that we all face down here with various parts of our community. But for me, I'll just try and go to the next slide. There we go. For me, it starts with who are you, your identity. Who's your mob? What's your skin name? Where's your country? So for me, that's where it all starts, really. It's having a strong foundation, having a strong culture, a connection to country. A bit about Yuendumu. It was established in 1946 as an Aboriginal reserve. It's a population of about 760 people, about 300 kilometres west of Alice Springs, all on bitumen now, and they're the three totems for that community and that country. It's well known for its Yuendumu doors, the bush mechanics, Australian rules, and all produced by the local organisation there, PAW Media. The Yuendumu school obviously has a really rich history. It's a bilingual school and its curriculum is based on Walpri knowledge cycles. The Walpri Nation in total is around 5,000 to 6,000 people. As we know, they're scattered all over the Territory and their land covers around 900 square miles under the Land Rights Act. The major economic activity on Walpri country is obviously the Granites Gold Mine. And this includes in 1936, it was the site of the anthropologist expeditions from the Board of Anthropology at the Adelaide University. It's got a long, long history, and part of the workshops you done yesterday was around governance. But for that part of the Territory, it sort of goes over 100 years now, where the first white contact settlers came into contact with Walpri. We all obviously have heard of the Coniston Massacre in 1928. And then not long after that, the Board of Anthropology research expeditions through the Tanami region in the 1930s. So again, between 1940s and 1950s, we see Walpri being moved into reserves, including Yuendumu, Hooker Creek, and Warrabri, or now known as Ali Kurung. Yuendumu was established as a reserve in 1946. The other bit, there's so much legislation that's gone on over the years and decades, but a really big impact on our community and other communities was the 2007 Northern Territory Emergency Response and the suspension of the Racial Discrimination Act. And then also Tony spoke a bit about the local government changes in 2008. And obviously the other big impact that the community's been dealing with is the shooting of Common J. Walker. I suppose moving on from all that is around the Walpri project. So it started about 5 years ago. And it's about collection and repatriation, identification. So for 5 years, we've been travelling around Australia, taking senior men and women, some of our young leaders, and repatriating cultural items that were taken, as I said, since 1930s from the Board of Anthropology and other people, other institutions. But the important thing is that we still maintain a strong culture. So for us, this is our constitution. We heard about the Self-Government Act, all those other acts that we went through not long ago. But for us, this is who we identify as. Who are we as Walpri? The 5 core pillars, Nurukulu. So it's our language, it's our law, it's our country or land, our ceremony, and our skin groups. That still exists today, that structure, that constitution, the way we live, and the way we are governed. So the Walpri knowledge systems, they're all intergenerational systems. As I said at the start, the school, part of their curriculum is the Warlpiri theme cycles. But the other system that we look at now is in terms of the research and repatriation, transfer of cultural knowledge, giving our young people and our community agency, collective decision making and advocacy. So we get to the other part of the Warlpiri project, moving on from repatriation. It's about cultural authority. And again, Tony talked about self-governance. This work's been going on for about 15 months through the local decision-making agreement and in my role as regional director. So many people might say, well, what is self-governance? What does it look like? Well, I can say in terms of the work we've done, and over the last 40 years of me travelling in and out and participating in ceremony, but also working with community, this is the model that we've come up with. And as I said, it's based on skin groups, so the 16 Warlpiri skin groups, 2 chambers according to ceremonial activity and ceremonial working together. So those skin groups, it's 8 male, 8 female, and they'd sit in 2 different chambers. The important part also is that the first priority for the Yuendumu Kuriji Wita Cultural Authority would be to take on the law and justice piece. So Tony talked about self-governance and about what could that self-governance enable this community to do. And one of the priorities they've said is law and justice. They'd like their own law and justice group. In terms of the overall running of the community, as we know with the intervention, the amalgamation of shires, the front door going forward, if we do get this cultural authority self-governance model up, would be Kuriji Wita Cultural Authority. So those skin groups that I showed you would be the self-governance model into Yuendumu. Services wouldn't be impacted in many ways. As we know today, we see a lot of those service providers down the bottom there. They're the front door at the moment, and while our community and cultural authority are just recipients of their services, what we want to do is tip that around, tip that upside down and say, hang on a minute, they're service providers. They're not the governance. They're not the decision makers of that community. So this is a model that we've been working on as well in terms of self-governance into Yuendumu. And what we'd say is that a very powerful way of doing that is through contract law. So you'd have your cultural authority group having a contract, whether it's with Central Desert Regional Council, with the police, with the clinic, and saying to those service providers that through contract law, they will decide if they're happy or not happy with your service, what are the terms and conditions of those services that those service providers are delivering. So in terms of the local decision-making process, it's, as I said, been going for 15 months. It started off actually probably longer, 5 years ago, with the Warlpiri Project Business Plan. We've gone through 15 months of community discussion, consultation, to the point where we've had a community proposal report presented to government, and now we're looking at some sort of LDM, local decision-making agreement or statement of commitment. In terms of a treaty, I've got a question mark there, but as I said, the research, identification, repatriation work has been really the foundational piece of rebuilding the Yuendumu community and the Warlpiri Nation with the aim of self-governance. For us, that's the 2 priorities of our project. In terms of a treaty, we don't know what that looks like, but as Tony did say before, that, you know, having self-governance, getting this piece of work done now is a really good start, I think, in terms of now us being able to go to be part of that process of a treaty. I think regionally based a type of regionally based commission could work. I know by language group, by country, would be really important in the Northern Territory to look at that approach. But one of the things that, Yuendumu wasn't consulted during the treaty commission work. So I think there's got to be a lot of work done on the ground with community in language about what is a treaty, what does it look like, what does it mean. So the research, identification, repatriation work, why did we do this before setting up this corporation or self-governance? And I've just got a quote here from one of the elders, which is, our objects are our ancestors, our encyclopedias. They tell us their creation stories that connect us to country, sites, our songlines. Without our sacred objects, we cannot sing the country, and the country will not regenerate and heal us. So the Warlpiri project, as I said, has been going for 5 years. It's Warlpiri-led and controlled. It's funded by our own money through the GMAC organisation. Over the 4 or 5 years, we've done 17 trips with approximately 85 Warlpiri men and women participating. We've probably had over 2,000 Warlpiri material or collections returned back to Yuendumu and to the project. This includes film, photographs, hair, blood samples, teeth casts, ancestor remains, open men and women objects, and sacred men and women objects. This is just a copy of one of the collections we had returned last year from the US. That was in The Guardian, Australia. So there was a lady by the name of Nancy Munn who, through the 1950s, spent 2 years out at Yuendumu, and a lot of that collection she took back to Chicago, and she taught in universities and museums about Warlpiri and about what she had learned. So upon finding out that her collection was due to come back to Australia, we intervened and we had to get the federal minister involved, and now that whole collection of 300 photos, 300 paintings and sacred objects are all now back in the hands of Warlpiri. So, as I said, it's really important that we started with the repatriation before we started the work on self-governance. It's just a bit of a project analysis, and just finishing off with a quote from Nelson Mandela. We must find amicable solutions based on democratic principles, which allows traditional leaders to play meaningful roles in all levels of government. We must never forget the institution of traditional leaders is sanctioned by Aboriginal law and custom, and by our culture and tradition. No attempt should be made to abolish it. Just in closing, I do have a short video that I want to show around an ancestor repatriation that we did last year. So yeah, that's probably the end of my my presentation. As I said, I just wanted to show you an example on the ground of what self-governance might look like. It might look different in your community with your language group, but this is how we are approaching it in Yuendumu. So yeah, no, thanks for that.
So the Warlpiri project started about 4 years ago, and it was after a visit that Jamie and I had done to the Strello Research Centre in Alice Springs with Kuman J. Nelson, Mr. Nelson and Robin Granitz. While we were there, we viewed objects that belong to Warlpiri, sacred objects, men's objects. I think I said today, the 4 years we've been doing repatriation work, it's been photos, films, sacred men's objects and really important collections. But out of all the repatriation work I think you can do, the most important one is ancestor repatriation. So for Warlpiri, this is the first ancestor we've had repatriated to country. So today probably was the most significant repatriation we've done over the past 4 years.
We're here at Piccoli to bring an ancestor home who was taken from this country. He was buried here a long time ago. So, us, this generation of people working in this space, it's our job to bring them home. You can't change what happened, but you can find a way back. And I think that's what today, and reburying this old man is a way to heal him, put him back where he belongs in his country. But I think as we've seen over the last 24 hours, it's much more than that.
Mostly, first of all, word can describe how I felt personally. It is really joyful along with my elders.
Yeah, there's still a lot to achieve and to do, even though we have achieved a lot already. I think the main goal is to get back as much as we can. You know, there's still more ancestors out there from Yuendumu and from Warlpiri. You know, there's museums all over the world that hold Warlpiri cultural heritage material, and they're really keen to work with us and potentially get us over there. So, you know, places like Germany, Denmark, you know, the United States, there's Warlpiri cultural heritage everywhere. So, yeah, I think the goal is to just keep building on this momentum and building the strength of the men, you know, through visiting these collections and bringing back what we can to country.
Yeah, we're all really excited, and yeah, it's really exciting times ahead.
I might just add a couple of more things. So just in terms of our project, going forward, there are some other exciting things that we're doing. One of the aspirations or things that we want to do is build a cultural centre, a truth-telling centre at Yuendumu. So for the last 3 years, we've been working with the University of South Australia and their architectural school. They've had about 240 students over 3 years design concept designs of a cultural centre for Yuendumu, and that's cost us nothing. So I think the other important thing is collaboration with other institutions. And we're just getting a briefing document together with the university that we can then start to present to funding bodies. The other thing we've been doing for the last 4 years is traditional trading with the Kimberley Aboriginal Law and Cultural Centre. So we trade our ochre for their pearl shells, and we're trading ceremonies. So that's the other important bit, is the cultural alliance across borders. And Tony also pointed out the Native Nations Institute. So Warlpiri started early discussions with Navajo through the Native Nations Institute and in the US around doing a case study on cultural governance. And also we're heading over to Germany in October, and we're looking at setting up a European Trust Foundation with the group network of anthropologists through Europe, and also all the private collectors and museums. So I think, in terms of a treaty, we've got to look across the Kansas states, Canada, Australia, New Zealand and the US. Going to Christchurch last year really opened my eyes around the treaty, learning from the Ngāhu Tahu iwi. There was actually 2 treaties with the Treaty of Waitangi. One was done by the chiefs, the leaders of Māori, in their language. The other one's done by the British. And actually how they interpreted the Māori treaty to what they finally got were 2 different things. A lot of different things were left out. And then we see today the challenges that the Treaty of Waitangi is having with the current government. So I suppose a very important lesson is interpretation. What do we mean as First Nations people? What do we see in that treaty? And then how will government interpret that? And what will the final treaty look like? So just really valuable lessons that we can learn from the Kansas states. And as far as I'm concerned, Warlpiri have to go overseas to look and learn from other people, because it's so hard in Australia. And also the legislative framework for us, thinking about, is it through United Nations, the Declaration of Aboriginal Rights, Indigenous Rights? Is it Commonwealth legislation? Or as Tony said, is it a complete new piece of legislation that we need to set up this treaty? Is it through the Self-Government Act? I don't know. I'm not a lawyer, but there's some of the questions that we've been asking. So yeah, no, thanks for your time.